Welcome to Sew and Sew, brought to you by Bernina, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with special members of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Meg McElwee, who is joined by her husband, Patrick. They are co-founders of Sew Liberated, which is located in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Meg, who grew up in California, and Patrick, who grew up in Florida, met while undergrads at the University of Notre Dame. They soon married and moved to the canyons of Mexico for several years. While working as a Montessori teacher, Meg started a blog and sold her first pattern, both to fund her fabric habit. They love working together and raising their 3 children. Although Patrick doesn't sew, he's the talent behind the filming and editing of the cinematic reels of Meg's sewing craft projects. They have many stories to share with us today. And so I'll say, Meg and Patrick, welcome to Sew and Sew.
Thank you for having us, Meg. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate this.
Absolutely. Meg, since you're the sewist in the crowd here today, let's start with you and say, when did you begin to sew and who is your inspiration?
I was one of the lucky people in my generation, so I was born in 1981, who learned how to sew from my mom. And my mom is the kind of mom who would sew my own little swimsuit. She would sew amazing Halloween costumes. One year, she made me a Pink Panther costume with a fabric, like molded fabric head. It was amazing. And so I grew up in a house where she had a bumper sticker that said, "The one who dies with the most fabric wins." So it was definitely part of my environment when I was a girl. And I started to sew just alongside my mom. She always welcomed me into her creative space, brought me to the local fabric store to choose fabrics for whatever she was making. So she brought me into that creative process. And soon enough, I was doing things probably when I was about 3rd or 4th grade. I would sew little cotton shorts, and back in the 80s, you could take a big white T-shirt, and you would cut a V into it, insert a V of fabric, and it would have these like frilly jersey, I don't know, parts to it. It was just very quintessentially 80s, and that's how I got my start in sewing, thanks to my mom.
Do you have any of the pieces that you sewed early on?
I don't. I do have some great photos of me wearing my handmade outfit, handmade shorts. You know, these are just quilting cotton shorts with my little fringy V-neck tee and wearing my headgear. I had braces at the county math competition.
Now you're gonna have to send us that for the website.
I'll have to see if my mom can scrounge it up in her collection. But yeah, classic.
So Meg, somebody else that was very influential on your life and your sewing was your Mexican grandmother, and you had quite a connection to her through your sewing. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's my grandfather is the one who was Mexican. My great grandparents are moved from southern Mexico to Central Valley of California in the 1930s. My great grandfather had a job at the railroad there, and so they raised my mom when she was young because my grandfather was off fighting the war in Korea. And so my mom actually grew up with her paternal grandparents, very, very close to her grandmother, and spoke only Spanish for the first 4 or so years of her life, that she was cared by her grandmother and grandfather. And so she just always had this beautiful connection to my great grandmother, who I never got the chance to meet. She passed away when my mom was in her 20s. sadly. My grandfather, I did meet. He passed away when I was about 6 or 7 years old. So anyway, she would just always tell stories of her grandmother and the very simple life she led, but with so much joy. She had a ton of children, and she would, from scratch, from very little resources, really, a little garden. She would make beautiful meals, tortillas from scratch over a wood burning stove. And she did a lot with her hands. And I think that she was one of the reasons why my mom sort of kept that handcraft, that idea of creatively enriching your family's life, and brought that into my childhood. So that's my connection to her, to my great grandmother. My grandfather is a fabulous guy as well, dear to my heart, and actually the artist, an artist in his own right, a singer and an artist, great drawer. so I'm connected with him in that way as well. But I do sort of feel like a lot of my creative genes must have come down through my Mexican side.
Wonderful family legacy. You both lived in Mexico for a while. Where did you live?
Yeah, we lived in the northern part of Mexico, up in Chihuahua. It's very near to the Copper Canyon, so we were basically kind of nested in the Copper Canyon. And if you ever go to the Grand Canyon here in the United States, they'll often say this thing, which is that the Grand Canyon is the second biggest canyon system in North America, and the Copper Canyon is actually the biggest.
Interesting.
The Grand Canyon is still spectacular. The Grand Canyon has those layers, and the Copper Canyon is monolithic, so you get the same kind of rock everywhere, so you don't get that same layered, but it's quite a spectacular place.
Well, we're gonna tie that then into the next question. This is for you both. Would you share the story of the founding and evolution of your company, which began, and I'm quoting you here, in 2006 in a drafty little house in Mexico on a street with no name? Tell us about that and why you chose the name Sew Liberated.
Yes, it did. It did start way back then, and I was in a situation in Mexico. So I was a Montessori teacher there in a little one-room schoolhouse. That was my graduate degree in Montessori education. And so I was looking to reconnect to my Mexican roots. I didn't grow up speaking Spanish as a first language. So I really wanted to cement that for myself and for future generations. So that's why we ended up looking for jobs in Latin America and Mexico specifically, and was happy to find this situation in rural northern Mexico.
And I will say, we got married very young, so we were in our early 20s at this point, with no kids yet. And so I think we were looking in part for a little bit of adventure. We were, I think, as a lot of young people are, a great feature of young people is that we really were looking to have a positive impact in the world and figure out, well, how could we live in the world that we found? And Meg, out of college, had started with Teach for America, teaching in New York City. And it was a difficult experience. And what was amazing is that she sort of got through with that experience and found Montessori education and got her master's in Montessori education. So we had this background through that where she was able to find a job down in Mexico. I, on the other hand, was coming from the world of politics, which is what I originally did right out of college, doing advocacy around immigration and other things. And I'll tell you, it was a big jump to go from the world of Washington, D.C. down to a rural street in Mexico with no name.
Yes, and I'll say the funny thing about the situation there and why I sort of pivoted into sewing more intensely than I had been before was that my job was from about 8:30 in the morning until about 2 in the afternoon. And this was back before the let me think here. This was back, when would that have been? 2005. So the crafting blog world was just kind of getting going. I was able to start following some fun people via the blog world. And I ended up having all this time on my hands, right? I didn't have any kids. The life in our little community of about 6,000, it was slow. It was community oriented. It was lovely, but I just had this time to dive into teaching myself how to sew in a more intense way, right? Just really leveling up my skills, and I did that largely through books that I would bring back down from, I would purchase them when I went back to visit family in the States, bring back the books, bring back some fabric. and I was learning pattern drafting basically at that point, because there also weren't very many stores there to purchase clothing. So it was just on a whim what I was doing to keep myself busy in the hours of the slow afternoons that I had. And as Patrick can maybe fill in here, I was earning hardly anything as a teacher in rural Mexico. I mean, we had our house, our rent taken care of, but we really had to save up our money. We had to save it so that we could buy tickets back to the U.S., plane tickets back to see our family regularly.
Well, and also to move back home. I remember being worried we weren't going to have enough.
Yeah. So Patrick, I think that you were the one who said to me after me bringing a suitcase full of fabric back from the U.S., you suggested, hey, why don't we figure out a way to fund this?
and publish one of the patterns that you were already making.
Yeah, I really I was teaching myself how pattern drafting, but I was also designing classroom materials for my little Montessori classroom. So we had little children's aprons and little learning materials for the classroom, and many of those I would some of them were sewn, some of them were other types of crafting, handwork to make these materials. But the Sew Liberated actually was initially called Montessori by Hand, and that was the crafting blog that I have. And I would just teach people how to make these materials that I was making for the kids in my classroom, which you couldn't buy in rural northern Mexico. So I just made them, and that's how it all started.
Your work seems to be very mission driven. Would you talk about what you see as this mission and purpose of what you do?
I guess I'll take a stab at that. I mean, Meg and I met at Notre Dame, and I think we met a lot through the Center for Social Concerns there, and just being interested in human liberation, human dignity in all kinds of ways. It was part of how we got down to Mexico. And I think at the time, there was a big DIY movement, as people called it. And we were reconnecting to our own labor. We were reconnecting to practices that our ancestors had done before us, but where we often felt like there was a link in the chain missing in that generational transfer of knowledge and customs and practices. Like, we were learning to garden, we were learning to cook, and Meg was learning to sew and draft patterns. And I'm not going to say that our parents didn't do those things, but there's a certain kind of alienation that people have felt, or that we felt at the time, from the work of our hands, right? If you're in a highly specialized society like we have, it brings us all kinds of riches, which is fantastic, but it can sometimes bring us that feeling of alienation. Like, I find a lot now with Sew Liberated that we get a lot of medical professionals coming to us. And it's not that their work isn't meaningful and hugely important, but I think that a creative hobby on the side often fills out that experience of being human. And so we were thinking a lot about that kind of a thing at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually in the context of, Meg, you were writing your first book. We were writing a book proposal that Meg ended up publishing.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we were. Mm-hmm.
And it was in the context of that we brainstormed the name Sew Liberated. And we really liked it because it connected us to all that. What we didn't realize that at the time is that our little pun wasn't the most original pun in the world. If you go to Quilt Market,
yeah,
you'll see a page or two or three of companies that start with the name So Crafty, So Liberated, So everything else in the world, but which is wonderful, and it does communicate something, but it wasn't as original as we thought.
Yeah, and Sew Liberated. So my intention going into it was, and in naming it Sew Liberated, was really born out of the beginning of our awareness of sweatshops and the fast fashion industry, which was in the early 2000s. Really, I feel like kind of starting to get going in a more and people were starting to be aware of this shift, right? Like, for example, I remember really loving when I could occasionally go into an anthropology store, which is just kind of a free spirit like, higher end, I would say, mid to high end clothing store. And I loved I loved the artistry behind what they were putting in their windows. I found their clothes to be fun. And so I occasionally would get a piece of theirs in college. But by the time just really in a matter of years, the price of an item from anthropology stayed the same or even got more expensive. But I noticed a decline in the quality of the construction of the garment. And so the idea was that in teaching people and empowering people to sew their own clothes, we could be a small part of a movement to really bring dignity back to for the maker of the clothes as well as for the wearer. So you think about fast fashion and the sweatshop and how the workers are exploited in that system. There's still human beings sewing clothes. Machines can't really sew clothes. Maybe they will one day, but even in the cheapest T-shirt you buy will be made by a human still. And so dignity for the makers. So I feel like when people learn how to sew their own clothes, their eyes can really be open to the time that it takes and the intricacies of the art. And it allows them to kind of open their hearts to other people who are making clothes around the world, not necessarily in the same situation as they have here at their comfortable, sewing room. And also dignity for the wearer of the clothes. So, the fast fashion industry really profits from our body dissatisfaction. And I think that the power of sewing your own clothes is learning how to fit them to your own beautiful body, no matter what it is in this very moment, right? Bodies shift, bodies change, but the ability to sew something that you really feel good in. And it also puts you in a position where if you have clothes that fit you and that you treasure, that you look at and think, oh yeah, I remember what I was thinking or what was going on in that time of my life when I made that piece, it becomes more meaningful to you. And getting dressed really becomes a practice of self-care and creativity. So that's kind of where the Sew Liberated came from. It really, we were thinking a lot about sweatshops and fast fashion back in those days. And we wanted to provide a small off-ramp to that for people who just want to feel good in what they wear and express themselves creatively.
So is that why you call sewing a rebellion against fast fashion?
Yeah, absolutely. We're thinking in terms of both the makers and the wearers, the consumers of fast fashion. It's a rebellion both to say this work is meaningful and it shouldn't be debased. It shouldn't be driven down to the lowest common denominator in terms of wages, in terms of quality. But also for those of us consuming it, we shouldn't feel like our bodies have to fit their clothes. Instead, by taking this back, we can understand that everybody is unique and that we can learn to fit the clothes to ourselves and to show up authentically as who we are in the world.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here and talk about how you help people learn how to sew. You have a course called Learn to Sew Your Clothes, which I want you to tell us about. But I also love the names of your other courses, the Mindful Wardrobe and the Creative Hinterland. Tell us about these courses.
Sure. I mean, this has been a creative work in itself for us. And Learn to Sew Your Clothes is actually a course series that we started to release, I think about 3 years ago. And it's designed to take beginning garment sewers, or really any garment sewer, from the point that they are and all the way up through to pattern making and pattern drafting. That final course, pattern making and pattern drafting, is what we call the creative hinterland.
Mm-hmm.
And that course, we took our most popular pattern at the time, which is the hinterland dress. And you can make, I think it's 12 hacks of that hinterland. And we go through in like really wonderful detail from our pattern maker, Judith Henriksen. And you learn how to do all those kinds of hacks. And so you can go all the way up to that point, but we also have Introduction to Sewing, where we'll take people through Sewing Machine 101, Introduction to Fabrics for garment sewing, sewing patterns, and so on. And every step along the way, including, I really think is the highlight, is our courses on fitting bodices and fitting pants.
Yes, those are definitely our most popular courses, because it's where a lot of people can get up to the point on their own where they are, they go from not knowing how to sew a seam to, they can figure it out. They can make clothes that are pretty loose fitting, but then they get to the point where they want nicely fitting top, right? And it's like, oh, how do I accommodate for, my D, my E, my F cup? How do I make these pants so they don't have this weird, fold here? It's so the great thing about our courses, and I will say, like, just a huge shout out to our behind the scenes Sew Liberated fitting experts, because with these classes, and especially the fitting classes, you just get one-on-one feedback and next steps for like how to get the garment that you feel really good wearing. So I'm really proud of the kind of customer service and hand holding that we do for the people who need it. For those who are more independent learners, you can go through the course. They're pre-recorded on your own time. You can go back and rewatch if you're, if you're like, okay, what was that again? I remember they mentioned this part, but you need to go back and look at it. That's great. It's there. But really, we have this really robust, it's almost like a Facebook group, but it's hosted on our own site, which is one of Patrick's genius points. He does all of the website backend and development work. So it's like a Facebook group, although you don't need to sign into Facebook and go down that rabbit hole to talk to our instructors and other members in the classes. We really value community and interaction with other people. And so while I do think that, of course, like the ideal situation, right, is your grandmother or your mother is sitting right next to you and showing you all these steps, right? But that's not the case for a lot of us. We perhaps don't have access to a local fabric shop that has garment sewing 101 classes or 201, 301. And so we decided to create the next best thing. And we really did that. We started work on these courses during the pandemic because, of course, that was a time where people couldn't get out of their homes and into their local shops. So, we always encourage people to look up their local fabric shop for garment sewing classes and to support them. We are big fans of supporting other creative businesses and just overall, but in our industry and our fabric crafting industry as well. But, if you don't have access to that, or you feel like you want to go at a slower pace, if you feel like you want to go at a faster pace, a class, an online class can be really beneficial for that kind of democratizing access to the time-honored skills of working with your hands.
And I wanted to shout out to our on-camera teacher for those courses, Sherry, who, for those who might be in the LA area who have ever passed through there, she used to run a fabric store in LA called Sew LA and had lots of experience teaching people in person. And so the fact that she lives here now and we got to benefit from her experience and just her incredible teaching style has been fantastic.
Sounds like you guys have an awesome team. That's what makes
really
it.
It's been amazing. I mean, I would say, like, we're talking about all this creativity. in the sewing. But I would say for Meg and I, together as a couple, having slowly grown this company since 2007, not always full time, but both of us full time for the last 6 years or so. It's really been so amazing to see this come together and just to be able to support a small team of creative people who are committed to this. It feels meaningful and it feels sustainable. Like we didn't start a business to get rich or to sell it one day or engage in like what we frankly see as some predatory practices that's caused, contributed at least to the closing of Joann's and the things that are happening with the big four and so pattern companies and so on. It's just been so wonderful to have a community that sustains this kind of work and we can have this small team coming together day after day.
Yeah, and I think we take that philosophy of right sizing into the mindful wardrobe course, which I know you asked about. I kind of forgot about in this learn to sew your clothes pathway. This is kind of a side quest, the mindful wardrobe, but the mindful wardrobe is really a style course, and sustainable style course, I will say. So in it, we help you go through a process where you identify what your specific needs are in your closet, be it climate, lifestyle, even down to simple, obvious things like how often do you wash and dry your clothes, and what does that mean for what size wardrobe that would be ideal for you? Because I love the idea of taking the overwhelm out of clothing yourself. It should be a joyful process. So in the mindful wardrobe, we identify your style preferences and marry those with your practical wardrobe needs to come up with a really clear, a path forward for you in your sewing and or thrifting journey about what are the holes in your wardrobe that you need filled, what are your priorities seasonally. And so people have a pathway forward, and it becomes less of an overwhelming process, less of an impulse buy type situation. There are a lot of sewing patterns in the market, and it can be tempting to just grab them all or start this project here. But this is a more just thoughtful way to move forward in curating your own handmade wardrobe.
Meg, there's a beautiful story that you wrote in 2020, which can be found on your website, and it's called A Philosophy of Sewing. It talks pretty openly about the events that took place with your son Lachlan's health and how it affected you and your sewing. Would you share that with us?
Yeah, so I guess it starts really back when we moved back to the United States from Mexico. I was working pretty much full time on Sew Liberated, and Patrick was a grad student in history at Duke. And grad student stipends are not great, and Sew Liberated at the time also was not didn't have the reach that it does today. So we were kind of just barely making ends meet, and I was working really hard to try to build the business, to try to get more patterns out in the world, just completely by myself. I wrote 2 books in those early days, which was really fun, but also super time consuming. Along the way, we had our first son in 2009. And then our second child, Lachlan, he was born in 2011, right a month before my second book came out. And he was born with a severe congenital heart defect. And I'll just say this right now at the very beginning of the story. He's doing great right now. He is 14 and a half years old. He's a drummer. He's an electric bass player. He's got this amazing crop of wavy auburn hair. He's a rock star. So he's doing well, but his condition required a series of 3 open heart surgeries. At 2 days old, at about 6 months old, and then again at about 3.5 years old. And he still only has half a heart. So he has an interesting circulatory system and some restrictions on, the kid's not going to run cross country or
Can't go on roller coasters.
Can't go on roller coasters. Can't go scuba diving. Right? Is that the other one? So he has an interesting sort of list of things he has to avoid. So that was a vibe shift for us as a family. You know, we went from assuming that we would have two completely healthy little kids, which in of itself, if you know anybody is a parent, you know that's a really intense time of life to have little children. And our second was to be born with this severe heart defect. So I continued to work really hard as Patrick was in grad school. Eventually, Patrick, you ended up finishing up with your master's and moving along just because it was so much financial stress on us. He needed to get a real job.
There was no way we were going to leave the community around Duke Hospital, given how much they had done to help him. So the history job market is not as robust as most people imagine it would be.
Right. So we stayed here. We put down roots. My parents moved here from California to help us out. And eventually, once Patrick found that other job that was, you know, moderately sustaining for our family, I sort of pivoted to work on Sew Liberated part-time and focus on getting us all through the little kids through this time. And I did it when I could, and there was always this long list of to-dos, right? There was just a lot of stress around it because for a long time it was the primary financial source of income for us, and it lost its joy for me, and it had been a source of joy previously. So I came to see it as almost this burden, and it wasn't until after my son's third surgery, which was kind of a grueling experience for all of us. It was a very long hospital stay. He ended up having a cardiac arrest at some point, and of course, you know, as you know, he was revived and move forward with his life after yet more hospital time. But yeah, after that, and our world just sort of started to shift a little back to what you might call a normal parenthood situation. Of at that point, we had added our third child. She's 3 years younger than our second, and I, because Patrick had a job outside of grad school, outside of Sew Liberated, I was able to focus just more on the kids. And Sew Liberated, we put first on the back burner, and then we kind of turned off the flame. And then we kind of tried to, like, I don't know, do something with it, but half-heartedly.
No pun intended.
No.
That's good one. Good one.
And I think, and I just having seen you through that process, like, I feel like once that financial pressure was taken off and the pressure to grow Sew Liberated as a business was taken off, it allowed you to see it in a new light. And I love going back and reading this post that you wrote, Philosophy of Sewing, and you could see how you were reintegrating the mending of Lachlan's heart with the mending that you do with fabric and thread.
Yes.
And creating a whole philosophy around that. And it allowed you the space to bring creativity back into your relationship to Sew Liberated. And that's really when you started to engage in Instagram was taking off. Blogs were no longer the thing. But I feel like that those early days of Instagram provided a bed for you to reconnect with the community and just like the reasons you were there in the first place.
Yes, to have the sort of the weight lifted off of my shoulders was huge. And I think so often of young creators in general, creative people who immediately have this push to make your creative impulses into a side hustle. I mean, it's grueling, and it was really a blessing to have that taken off of my shoulders. So and it was amazing how fairly quickly I just started coming up with all of these ideas, and it just became fun again. And it became an act of love and excitement. And I don't know if you want me Meg to read the sewing manifesto verbatim, but I'm happy to do that.
I was going to ask, you talk about your personal manifesto in here. So I think your question dovetails right into this. Share it with us.
Sure. So it has 3 points. Number 1 is begin each project with the intention of expressing love and gratitude for the intended recipient, be it myself or others. Number 2 is breathe deeply while cutting, breathe deeply while sewing. Sewing is slow, and the act of slowing down is a gift of mindfulness. Accept any interruption in the process as a gift to be present. Find joy in the process and appreciation for the amount of time it takes. Now, as I'm reading this back, I'm thinking to the time of life I was in. There were a lot of interruptions because I had little kids. Number 3 is bring creativity not just to sewing, but to the act of getting dressed. Use sustainability as a creative parameter by styling what is already in your closet in new ways. Thrift what you need, but don't have time to sew. When clothing wears down, mend it. So that just allowed me to get rid of that list, the ever-growing list of projects to do, right? Mm-hmm. And it definitely it helped me, especially as a young mother. And I still, looking back on it, it applies today.
Patrick, during that time, how did you feel about all this?
We've been lucky since the time we moved to Mexico. We really had lived our life sort of together in a way where it wasn't like we each went off to full-time jobs. When we were in Mexico, I was working mostly as a volunteer for a local clinic, working with the Tarahumara indigenous communities in the area, but also working at home a lot of the day. When we had little kids, I was in grad school. Meg was working on Sew Liberated, and we basically divided the day half and half, working from home. At this time, in order to sort of solve that financial question for our family, I actually went off to work as a computer programmer, and I went to a cubicle day after day. Meg was home, actually homeschooling. I'm not sure if she mentioned that. So on top of everything, she was actually using her Montessori training to teach our own kids.
Right, because we couldn't afford to send our kids to Montessori school. So we just did it at home.
And it was just so beautiful to watch, to be honest. There was a certain flowering that in doing that, because it's something that Meg had trained for a long time and to do. But on the other hand, it could be kind of isolating, to be in a nuclear family in our house, teaching the kids day in and day out, whereas I got to go out. I got to socialize with adults, even if it was at a job. And so I could see that Meg was sacrificing a lot in order to be able to do that. And I was just reflecting that when you wrote this philosophy of sewing, I think you were pulling together ideas that you'd had for some years at that point, but it was December of 2020. So we were, 6 months into the pandemic when we had all suddenly come home. And at that point, our kids had just recently started school outside the house, which turned out great for them in a number of ways. But suddenly everybody was back in the house together, and we were trying to run the business, and it just felt like we could go about 5 minutes until one of the 3 kids would demand our attention for some urgent need or another.
Yes.
So when you're talking about slow sewing and accepting interruptions, we were accepting a lot of interruptions in those days.
Mm-hmm. So, in just Megan, hearing you read that, it slows you down and puts you in the moment instead of checking off boxes. Is that something that you keep close to you and kind of recount on a regular basis?
Yes. And more so. I mean, I've become far more interested in hand sewing as I've gone forward. In fact, our next pattern is called the slow shirt. I'm wearing it right now. I've been wearing it for the last 5 days. It's a large overshirt.
You just apologized to me before this podcast for just how many days you'd been wearing it. Mm-hmm.
Well, so it's a great, very comfortable layering piece, and And it's the first of our patterns that's going to come out with instructions for sewing it on machine, but also by hand. So that's very exciting for me because I love the idea of bringing garment sewing, sort of bringing that same benefit that some people who are knitters or crocheters might get from having a project that they can, pack in a bag and take with them to the sideline of a soccer game or whatever they're doing. It's a little more portable, and that can be the case with hand sewing. And I love the rhythm of the stitches. I love the sound of the thread as it pulls through the fabric. It's just a really sensorially just warm and lovely experience. So yes, and this idea that we really don't need as many clothes as we think we do. And that's one thing that I want to help other people move into that space with their wardrobes as well, to have the clothes that they love, like me and this shirt, which I've worn for 5 days straight. Clothes that they love so much that fit them well, that ultimately, like, we just don't need as many clothes as the fast fashion industry would have us believe. And it's really liberating to sort of exist outside of that societal pressure, the societal pressure to like be, have a certain style or fit into a certain size, or right, like have just the perfect wardrobe. It's just a slow process, and it can be made even slower by hand sewing. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm at with my philosophy of sewing right now.
What's your obsession with sparkling water?
I just think it feels fun. It's like a party in my mouth.
I saw that on your website and I had to ask.
Every day it makes it extraordinary.
we're not big drinkers, but I do. I love sparkling water. I'm one of the only people in my family who does. We used to have one of those carbonating, it's like a soda stream type of thing in our house. And it exploded on us twice. So I've had to give up a lot of my my more regular consumption of sparkling water. But I do occasionally purchase it when I'm out and about. It's my treat.
Now, something else that's important to you is making music with the whole family together. Tell us how that happens.
That's right. Well, I will say that I don't know if I could pick, if I had to choose one thing to do creatively for the rest of my life, if it would be sewing and fiber art, or if it would be singing and music, because I really value both. And of course, sewing is a little more of a quiet craft, whereas singing is singing is not quiet. But the fun thing about family life for us, and Patrick is a multi-instrumentalist as well, and loves to kind of geek out over music theory and learning new instruments and whatnot. So the genetic combination of the two of us and our kids, 2 of the 3 are exceptionally musical. We live in a very loud house, which is something that, I'm an introvert, but I have come to really treasure. We have our middle kid is a drummer and an electric bass player, and our daughter is she can project like none other singing wise. So she's really into musical theater. She and I just, which was very fun, we tried out for our local community theater, which they were putting on the Sound of Music production. And I was one of the nuns who was solving the problem of Maria, and she was Brigida von Trapp. So we got to do that together, and that was super great.
I will say that, life is change, and both the ability and the willingness of our kids to engage in family music time has evolved over the years. Our middle son, who is a drummer, he's found his way into rock and roll bands, and so playing folk music around the living room doesn't speak to him in quite the same way as it maybe once did.
That's right.
But instead, what I do is when he's playing drums up in his room, I just try to play piano along to his beat if I can.
I think maybe that'll evolve. I think he'll come back around to the family living room at some point.
Yeah, once nostalgia kicks in.
That's right.
So let me ask, what are you guys working on now?
Well, our most recent sewing pattern that came out is called the retazo coat. Retazo means scrap in Spanish,
Mhm.
and it uh, was again a way of slowing down and using what we have in the spirit of, oh gosh, Joann's has closed and people are struggling to purchase fabric, perhaps with the costs going up. So we thought, let's just put out a pattern that speaks to scrap usage and allows people to creatively like use what they have. And
Mhm.
so the retazo coat is it's a quilted coat pattern. It has a unique quilt coat silhouette. It's more shapely than a typical boxy quilt coat, and the instructions in it guide you towards a quilt as you go method for each panel. So you can really use your scrap pile creatively, and you could use a thrifted quilt top, a thrifted quilt. You could use pre-quilted fabric, whatever. But that's been our most latest, that's been our latest pattern that came out. So
Mhm.
that's been fun. And up on the docket next is a oversized shirt pattern that is also for the first time we're coming out with machine sewing instructions, but also hand sewing instructions, which I'm really excited about because I think hand sewing is a great way to sort of bring the spirit, the portable, little bit here, little bit there spirit of knitters and crocheters into the sewing world, learning how to hand sew and bringing a project along with you, to the sidelines of a soccer game or to an appointment. During a meeting, you can sew a little seam by hand. It's a way of both slowing down the process and allowing you to have something calming and tactile that you can work on um, at any point in your day,
Mhm.
which is why knitters love knitting so much, right? It is a calming practice. So I'm really excited about this unique direction we're going in the both in the retazo quilt coat pattern, but also in this upcoming pattern, which is called the slow shirt, and that'll be out in January 2026.
So that slow shirt, is that like the one that you wore for 5 days straight?
That is exactly it. Yes, it's gotten a lot of wear.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'm very slow to put it into the dirty clothes pile. Let's put it that way.
Whenever we have a pattern in development, I'm always getting on Meg's case, or I'm always nervous because she'll wear it all around, and I'll say, I haven't taken photographs of that yet. And she always assures me that she never spills, so it's
No,
okay.
no, never.
So you might both have the same answer or you each might have a different answer. What's your dream?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I've been thinking a lot just about sort of sustainability and sustainability in how we run our businesses and run the economy. And I guess if I had a dream, it would be that we'd have a change in the culture to strengthen the idea that enough is enough. I think we see social media companies with all this pressure to constantly be getting more and more out of our attention. With Joann's closing,
Mhm.
and with private equity taking over the big four sewing companies, I just sometimes think that this drive for more and more profit poisons some of our ability to relate to each other. And so I guess I'd hope for some cultural shifts, which I do see out there, to say, okay, enough is enough, and let's have businesses that can be sustainable and continue
Mhm.
to provide each other with what we need.
I think my dream is to have Sew Liberated really just be a warm and welcoming space for people who are uh, overwhelmed by life and just in general. I would love to be able to reach more people who are looking to just kind of heal their relationship with their bodies and the clothes they wear. Um, So I guess that's always my dream for Sew Liberated. And I know that little by little we do this. I guess for me personally, I would also, I'll say a shout out to our team at Sew Liberated, because I'm at a place now at Sew Liberated. We have a wonderful new marketing director that we brought on. So that can Patrick and I can kind of take a little bit of a step back from that and into some more exclusively creative work. So and our community manager, she's wonderful. We just have such a wonderful little team of good people that are dedicated to the same idea of providing people with a really positive creative experience. So I'm hopeful that we continue to just be able to do that, and also that I have maybe a little more time to do even more creative things behind the scenes.
So, in everything we talked about today, is there a question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
Oh, I can't think of any.
No, I feel like it's been really a wonderful conversation, and I
Yeah.
appreciate the effort and the work you do in being such a great interviewer.
Yeah, we're
Thank
so
you.
appreciative.
Thank you. You both have been wonderful to talk to today. We've learned so much. And I know that our listeners would love to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, you can always come to our website at sewliberated.com. That's SEW. And we're on, of course, Instagram and Facebook, YouTube. We're even on TikTok if you're on there. We've been making some more short video content that's been a lot of fun. And if you happen to be a quilter, we've got a special page if you go to sewliberated.com/quilters, and we can give you some more information about the offers we have for quilters and what we might suggest you to get started if you're looking to get into garment sewing or to level up your skills there. You can always also email us at info@sewliberated.com.
And I know that you're looking forward to hearing from listeners of this podcast and for special opportunities for them as well.
That's
Absolutely.
right. And we just can't wait to welcome you into our happy little garment sewing world.
Meg and Patrick, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Meg.
Well, there you have it. Another story about people just like you. People for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@sewandsewpodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, sewandsewpodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.